The big news from around the NFL from over the weekend that wasn't obviously Super Bowl related. Aaron Rodgers, Jets quarterback, no longer. They apparently will be moving on from the 40-plus-year-old after his first season as a full-time starter. Obviously didn't go the way they wanted. They own the 7th overall pick in this upcoming draft. Was this a good move, Kyle, from the Jets' perspective? Or
Well,
could he have thrived in it?
as it pertains to the New York Jets, I think it is probably a good move because you're bringing in a new regime. You want as little distractions as you can get in a town that's under the microscope like none other, a team that's under the microscope like none other. Aaron Rodgers, for better or worse, brings with him a lot more cameras, a lot more microphones, a lot more media members that aren't concerned necessarily about your football team, but they just want to be involved with stardom. And that's what Aaron Rodgers brings along to a team. So for Aaron Glenn, the opportunity to start fresh, get some new leadership at the quarterback position, I think it's a good move. And for Aaron Rodgers, it's interesting. It is interesting to me because we talked all year about the fact that he didn't look like himself. He wasn't mobile. Well, then we had complaints about the offense. They were stagnant pre-snap. They weren't cutting edge. We had a firing at the head coach position. We had numerous changes within the Jets regime. Now he gets an opportunity to potentially meet with a couple of these suitors and pick out something that he deems to be an acceptable place for him to go play football. And I think the best is yet to come, maybe in terms of this recovery for Aaron Rodgers, because last year he wasn't fully healthy. I mean, no matter how you cut it, he's 40 years old, coming off of Achilles. It took him a long time. Towards the end of the season, we started to see a version of Aaron Rodgers that you and I would deem to be an acceptable level of starting quarterback in the National Football League. What do you think about it, Mike?
Yeah, as much as I thought he gives you the best chance to win this next year, right? If you're thinking 2025, how do we maximize our win total? Aaron Rodgers is going to be better than pretty much anyone they find in the free agent market, anyone they find in the draft. That's just how it is. But you have a new head coach, you have a new GM, you have a long-term vision, and you're trying to build, more importantly than anything else there in New York, a culture. And obviously, with Aaron Rodgers, he not only brings the stardom, he brings a certain type of culture that may not go eye to eye with what Aaron Glenn's trying to build there, or he may not, even if he would want to fit in, he may not be completely bought in year one. And you need more than anything else there for the New York Jets. You need buy-in. And so you don't need to win 15 games year one. You don't even need to make the playoffs year one if you're Aaron Glenn. You just need things to be building towards the right way while that roster improves, while you work towards getting a franchise quarterback. So from all those perspectives, if we're bringing Aaron Rodgers back, it is a one-year deal. It ain't going to be for the long term. I cannot fault the Jets for doing this. Truthfully, if I was in charge there, probably the same direction I would have gone. But how do we think Aaron Rodgers lands somewhere, or do we think this is the end for him?
Man, I think he wants to play. I think he still wants to play. And, I killed him early in the season. Some of the stuff that I saw from the Jets, some of the stuff I saw from that offense, it just was like terrible taste in my mouth for what I'm used to with Aaron Rodgers. But the end of the season saved it for me. And I'm sure, like a really bad golf round that finishes with maybe a nice putt, he's like, you know what? I think I'll golf again next week. And that might be his mentality. He's still got it. It's not like he's completely crippled. He can still throw the football. I'd love to see him go play football. It just depends on where. Where do you think he could play, Mike?
Oh man, that's the thing right now is there's not a lot of teams that are like the one quarterback away from really competing the way, like maybe the Bucks were when they signed Tom Brady, and obviously they were because they got him and then they won the Super Bowl. But there's not a lot of great rosters out there that are just that one guy. So ultimately, I think he probably ends up hanging it up because I'm not sure anyone's going to want to really back up the money train for him the way he's going to want, unfortunately. All right, next storyline here. Deebo Samuel, 49ers wide receiver, has gotten permission to seek a trade. Obviously, the writing here was a little bit on the wall when, one, they drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round last spring. Two, they gave Brandon Ayuk a massive, massive deal preseason last year. And then three, Deebo Samuel just looked not like his former self. Somehow it seems like, shouldn't be too surprised that the guy who started getting the workload of a running back started aging like a running back, the 29-year-old wide receiver coming off his second fewest yards from scrimmage in his entire NFL career. and obviously he's been banged up a lot over his NFL career. Do we think anyone is going to want to absorb his, somewhat middling cap hits this next season? It shouldn't cost him too much, but obviously he's on the downside of his career at this point.
It would have to be a team that has some pieces already built into that offense on the outside, because to your point, the guy he just can't do the volume that he used to do. He was on the field doing the dirty work, taking a lot of hits, being asked to do so many different things in the offense for San Francisco. Number one, I think it's a great opportunity for him to have a change of scenery. They've experienced so much success in San Francisco and gotten so close so many times. I just think maybe a new look on things, a new lease on life for Deebo Samuel would do him good. And for the team that's bringing him in, make sure that you have guys that you can rely on, because Deebo is a guy at this point in his career where you can't really know for certain that he's going to be out there week in, week out.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think that the trade, if they do get anything in return from 6th, 7th rounder, this will be a late day 3 pick. I know Cooper Kupp's also on the market. He's in a similar boat where a little bit bloated of a contract, gonna be difficult to find a suitor. Basically, just someone who's gonna want to kind of buy the negotiating rights with him, because I don't think anyone's gonna take on his contract either. But are there any names around the league that you could see being a good fit for someone like Deebo Samuel?
Man, oh man. I think about a group like Kansas City, who has had injuries and question marks at their receiver position. DeAndre Hopkins, I'm not sure what his future holds for him. Travis Kelce is going to be making a big decision about that future. And who isn't lining up to go play with Patrick Mahomes? Let's be honest. I mean, regardless of what we saw last night, the answers for me are always Kansas City and Buffalo. Maybe a team like Baltimore who'd be able to utilize him in a role that suits his archetype. He can do so many different things, and they're not going to lean on him heavily and test his structural integrity. But I think one of these teams that has an opportunity to be making a run at the Super Bowl would be my guess for Deebo.
The first one that came to mind for me was Denver Broncos, because one, they need the wide receiver position, obviously Cortland Sutton, and then a lot of nobodies. And two, just the nature of that offense. You run a lot of screens, you run a lot of underneath passing game, a lot of stuff where you're getting the ball in the receiver's hands, ask them to make plays. We saw last year that that's probably, if you could still do one thing at a fairly high level, that's the one thing. Obviously, health, sort of, age at this point, all a factor. He won't cost much for them. So I think that's the one spot where I'm like, it would probably be worth it for a team like Denver to take a flyer on him. But I'm not looking at it. I think whoever trades for him or signs him or whatever, they're not looking at that as like, we fixed our wide receiver position. He's kind of just this ancillary piece at this point, like a number 3 sort of gadget weapon. I don't think his days as a number 1 or number 2, I don't think there's a coming back anytime soon. All right, last bit of news here. Saints. They are reportedly going to hire Kellen Moore as their new head coach. Do we like this move? Is this a good move for the Saints, or is Kellen Moore going to be back on the market as an OC here in a couple of years?
Hey, look, I like Kellen Moore, and obviously he's been to the top of the mountain here now with Philadelphia. You get an opportunity to go down to New Orleans. You got some good pieces up front. You get an opportunity to do a number of different things there with that roster. Obviously, the contracts, the front office stuff, I'll leave that up to you to discuss when it comes as it pertains to the New Orleans Saints. But Kellen Moore, bright guy, young guy, played the game. I tend to trust those guys more than the next. I'm not saying he's going to be a miracle worker in New Orleans next year, but I will say I'm not angry at the hire for New Orleans, and Saints fans should know that they got a smart offensive mind in the building.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see how it goes. I think Kellen Moore's perspective, I hope he got some semblance of a guarantee in terms of years on this, because as we've discussed many times with New Orleans Saints, it's not a 1-year turnaround. It's not a 2-year turnaround. This is 3 years of cap hits that you're going to have to eat, that you're going to have to strategically sort of work around and not kick the can on anymore. And there's some of this stuff that you can't even kick the can on anymore. It's all coming due here, that you basically, this has to be a 3-year experiment with Kellen Moore. If you're going to accept this job as a head coach and not want to be the OC of the Philadelphia Eagles, because if you're the OC of the Philadelphia Eagles right now, that's a pretty cushy gig, right? You got a lot to play with there. You ain't going to get fired anytime soon, I don't think, if you're Kellen Moore with all that talent that he has there in Philadelphia. So, um, with that being said, I have no clue how it's going to work out. It depends so much on what they do from a team building perspective that he could be one of the best offensive coordinators in the world, one of the best offensive minds in the NFL, and it still could look really ugly there over the next 2 seasons. That's just unfortunately where they're at as a franchise.